Recording in progress.
Come all you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old Union has come in here to dwell.
A battle in the heart of Alabama caught our attention. Coal miners in one community, they've been on strike now for months.
Working as long as 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, in some of the most dangerous conditions.
I really think that the labor movement is the single greatest force for democracy in the history of the United States.
The story of Alabama is a story of not just resilience, but of militancy.
I say no contract, you say no coal. No contract, no contract.
If we ain't all free, ain't none of us free.
You're listening to Alabama's only union talk radio show, The Valley Labor Report, with Adam Keller and Jacob Morrison.
Hello, Tennessee Valley. This is The Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison, here with my co-host and fellow agitator, Adam Keller. We are broadcasting live online and on the radio from the heart of the Tennessee Valley, the Spice Radio studio in Huntsville, Alabama. Today, up with the Teamsters, up with Unite Here. David Griscom from Left Reckoning joins to talk about Texas and folks, quote, voting against their own interests. We're going to dive deep into that. Adam is going to talk about schools, all that and more on today's Valley Labor Report. If you want to be part of the program today, we've got a phone number and the line is open. You can call or text 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857. You can also leave a voicemail throughout the week and we might answer your call on the radio. So definitely call in if you want to be part of the show. Leave us a voicemail if you have some thoughts throughout the week. If you haven't gotten enough of us by the time that we wrap up here on the radio, or if you just want to see what we're up to throughout the week, then you can find us online, in particular on our website, TVLR.fm, where we are coming out with new content every day. So you're going to want to bookmark our website. You're going to want to sign up for our newsletter as well. We have a weekly update that comes out once a week on Thursdays to give you the recap and some information about what's going to be coming on the following Saturday's show, as well as we have a daily newsletter as well that gives you Monday through Thursday, gives you everything that we have put out that day. Comes in your inbox at the end of the day, so you can check it out as you are leaving the office or you're coming in the next day. So definitely go to tvlr.fm/contact and let us know if you want to be on the daily or the weekly newsletter list. Just a reminder, your support helps us stay on the air. Our largest single source of funding comes directly from our listeners. So if you want to support the program, you can go to tvlr.fm/donate, and you can make a one-time donation sort of as a tip, or you can become a sustaining member and sign up for one of our dues tiers, or create a custom one. You can donate as little as $1 a month, and also as much a month as you would like. We are having a fundraiser tomorrow that you can come to in person in Birmingham at the CWA Union Hall. The CWA Union Hall from 1 to 4 p.m. We're going to have a small live show. We're going to have some food. The Youth Caucus of the State Democratic Executive Committee here in Alabama is putting it on for us. We're really appreciative of them and appreciative of their support. So if you are in or around the Birmingham area, and you want to spend some time with us tomorrow, maybe after you get out of church, then you can buy a ticket at tvlr.fm/fundraiser. 100% of the funds are going to go straight into funding the Valley Labor Report. The Youth Caucus is covering the cost of food and renting the hall if CWA is charging them. So 100% is going to go into the operations budget of the show. So if you appreciate what we're doing and you're around Birmingham, then maybe swing by. You can also purchase a ticket at the door, or you can go ahead and buy it. So that way you've got it at tvlr.fm/fundraiser.
Yeah, really hope folks show up. Love to see some folks in person and chat, and you're welcome to participate. So if you're in the Birmingham area, come pay us a visit.
Absolutely.
About that.
And we also have some merch. Like I said a while ago, we ordered about 20 extra of the Good Things State t-shirts. Those should be finished. The production should be finished on those late this month, so they'll be coming out to you in May. And if you didn't get one, we have 20 extra, so make sure that you get one of those at tvlr.fm/store. And if you're a member of a union, then think about getting your local to sponsor the show. We could not do the program without our local sponsors, and so you can reach out to me for more details on that. If your membership has any questions, we are happy to come to a meeting in person if it's in the area, or via Zoom, or I can just call in and you can put me on speakerphone to answer any questions.
Absolutely. And we've done that before. We've spoken at union meetings. And in fact, if you have any organization that might be remotely interested, if you think there's an organization that you belong to that is interested in labor and supporting independent media in Alabama and the South, then let's get that conversation started. We're happy to do that and happy to partner with you. I do want to add a disclaimer that any viewpoints or opinions expressed in this program belong solely to their author and do not necessarily represent any organization or sponsor. We welcome all of our listeners, whether you are on YouTube, Facebook, WVNN, WZZA, WHIV, or through your favorite podcast app. We are proud to be part of the Labor Radio Podcast Network and encourage our listeners to check it out. We're hoping that this project can make a difference, that we can provide a bigger platform for working class people in Alabama and across the South. We can't do this without you, and we want to thank everyone for tuning in. Whether you're a loyal fan or a first-time listener, we appreciate you spending some time with us this morning.
Absolutely. So let's go ahead and jump into this. We've got some good news to start off with. That is, Teamsters and Unite here have posted some big numbers on the board. Ian Colgren at Bloomberg took a look at Department of Labor filings for Bloomberg. And while, of course, the overall picture wasn't so great, we talked to y'all about it when the Bureau of Labor Statistics stats on union membership came out. Union membership actually fell again last year from 10.3% to 10.1%, the lowest union density rate since we began taking measurements. So, there's a lot of different feelings in the air about unions, but unfortunately it hasn't materialized as much as we would hope. But there are some bright spots in the picture, in particular the International Brotherhood of Teamsters reported gaining 206,000 members just last year.
Wow.
An increase of 20% from the previous year.
That's amazing.
That is huge. This is going to be a big help as they go into contract negotiations with UPS later this year. More on that later. But they weren't the only ones with good news. Unite Here also added nearly 40,000 hospitality workers, a gain of more than 18%. They had the second largest gain by percentage right after the Teamsters. And that's after they lost nearly all of their members at the height of the pandemic. If you'll recall, they lost, I believe it was 98% of their membership during the pandemic. And so for them to come back as strong as, I think they have now more members than they did before the pandemic started. So they are really, really, just on a roll. We talked to Unite Here International President Dan Taylor last year on the show about their comeback from the pandemic and their special emphasis on the South as well. I think that he mentioned that over his tenure as president, they've organized something like 20,000 workers in the Southeast, and it looks like they haven't let up. So really, really exciting to see that news.
Hell yeah. Love to see that.
And like I said, we're going to do a little bit of an update about the UPS negotiations. Their contract with UPS, the largest private sector contract in the country. I think it is the largest contract with a single employer in the entire country, covering some 350,000 UPS workers. The contract expires on the 31st of July this year. And the International Brotherhood of Teamsters last week called on the United Parcel Service to stop stalling and begin negotiating in good faith. They contend that UPS is not seriously negotiating and not seriously committed to finalizing supplemental contract negotiations as soon as possible, saying that the company telling the company that bargaining for a new national agreement is not going to begin until all of the supplemental agreements are ratified. And so, that is a stance. And it's not like they're just coming out with this stance now. That has been something that the International Brotherhood of Teamsters has told UPS from the beginning. They said from the beginning, this is the order that the contracts need to be negotiated in. We need to get ironed out all of the supplemental regional agreements, between the locals and UPS before we begin bargaining on the national agreement. And that's been their position the whole time. And the Teamsters are saying that UPS is just not moving quickly enough to hammer out the final details on some of these supplemental contracts. And so they say that they began supplemental contract negotiations with UPS in January. And out of 40 supplements to the national contract nationwide, 30 remain unresolved after repeated delays by UPS. 75% of the supplemental contracts remain unresolved after 4 months of bargaining.
Wow. Well, that speaks for itself.
Yeah. Teamsters General President Sean O'Brien said, quote, "We have clearly stated our intentions to UPS from the beginning that there would be no national negotiations until these regional contracts are completed. This is not a game, but you wouldn't know that based on UPS's behavior. The livelihoods of our members are at stake. UPS delays, disappears, drags its feet, and refuses to talk about the real issues that workers need addressed, and the Teamsters aren't going to stand for it." Like I said, more than 340,000 Teamsters work at UPS, protected by the largest private sector collective bargaining agreement in North America, and the current 5-year agreement expires on July 31st, 2023. And UPS Teamsters are also covered under supplemental agreements. And so here in their press release, they describe kind of what these supplemental agreements are. They're riders or addendums specific to the regions in which these UPSers work. These contracts define provisions not covered under the national agreement, like paid time off, discipline language, seniority, overtime, and work hours. From the Teamsters General Secretary Fred Zuckerman, the Teamsters and UPS have 12 weeks to come to terms before our contract expires, and UPS is not taking this seriously. UPS has had 4 months to bargain in good faith and reach agreement on supplemental issues. They haven't. they don't get to drag out this process, we will be in Washington ready to reach agreement on all outstanding issues in our supplemental contracts. It's up to UPS to get its act together, show up, and do right by its workforce. Until then, there will be no negotiations on a national contract. Going back to O'Brien, he says after pulling in record-breaking revenue of more than $100 billion last year, UPS is delusional to think that they can just ignore the workers who make them successful. UPS is making a joke of supplemental negotiations. When they finally decide to bargain in a professional and serious manner, the Teamsters will be here ready to go. So we look forward to seeing more updates from them as negotiations on the supplemental contracts continue and the national contract negotiations begin. And hopefully we'll be getting some of these Teamsters on the show sometime to talk about it.
Yeah, and I think it's important, this statement that they put out, I think it was important to lay it out there for the public that, this is what has been going on all this time. This is what we've been clear about, and it's UPS who's delaying things. I think that's important because, we know where this could head later this summer. UPS
is going to try to blame it on the union. UPS is going to try to say that, these workers have too much money. The multi-millionaire CEO is going to try to say that the workers are greedy and the workers aren't bargaining in good faith. And so it's important for folks to understand early on that those arguments are going to be BS.
Right. And, they say all that while they won't even put air conditioners in the trucks.
Right. Or fans.
Right. And while they have a 2-tier system. Yeah. So, there's a lot of progress that needs to be made, and I commend the Teamsters for this strong statement and, wishing them all the best in these negotiations.
Yep. We're going to go ahead and head to a break. On the other side, we're going to be talking to David Griscom. He is one of the hosts of Left Reckoning, a popular YouTube program about left politics with a particular focus on real issues affecting working folks. I really enjoy their content.
Yeah,
so we're going to be talking.
Yeah,
we're going to be talking to him about Texas and about ideology and the working class. It's going to be good. So make sure you stay tuned. We'll be right back. You're listening to the Valley Labor Report.
IBW 558 is like a great football team. You've got to have the aptitude, skills, and knowledge to outperform the competition. If you're a non-union electrician, now is the perfect time to get off the sideline and join our team. We have the absolute best wages and benefit package in North Alabama and Southern Tennessee. It's because our team stands together, bargains together, and our families benefit from it. With immediate openings, you have the opportunity to see why the IBW is the right choice.
Support for the Valley Labor Report comes from the International Federation of Professional and Technical Engineers Union. Learn more by visiting www.ifpte.org.
The attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs have stood with the working people of Alabama for over 40 years, providing skilled legal representation for your workplace injury claims. When you are injured on the job, it can be a scary time. The attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs have the experience to guide you through the process to make sure that you and your family are properly taken care of and your rights are protected. If you need help, call the attorneys at Maples, Tucker & Jacobs at 855-617-9333 or visit online at www.mtnj.com. No representation is made that the quality of legal services provided is greater than the quality of legal services provided by other law firms.
Support for this program comes from the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local 136 out of Central Alabama. Learn more at ibew136.org.
Attention union members, membership organizations, podcasters, or anyone with a payment processing need. The future is here, and your organization needs to be prepared by working with Unionly. With Unionly, your union or organization can take payments on a mobile device, eliminating processing fees, giving you a better price than other payment processing methods, while at the same time supporting a union-friendly business with a specialized skill set to meet your needs. Your members will thank you when they pay their dues at their convenience without waiting in line to deposit cash or check. Start preparing for the future today by calling 206-595-8631 or visiting unionly.io.
Are you looking for a better future, a career that can have you set for life, and to be a part of something that's bigger than yourself? If you are, then consider a skilled trades apprenticeship with the International Union of Painters and Allied Trades. The work of IUPAT is all around us, from the industrial painters who work on the bridges to drywall finishers, floor coverers, the glazers who install the glass in our skylines, and so much more. With an IUPAT apprenticeship, you earn while you learn and receive benefits while learning the trade, including a pension. We provide world-class education free of charge. That's right, no student debt. Our starting salaries for apprentices that graduate is above the national median salary with benefits for entire families. And you have the flexibility to take your trade wherever you'd like in the country to work. IUPAT District Council 77 covers our entire region, so give Adam Booth a call at 205-603-3142 for more information. Again, that phone number is 205-603-3142. Come build a better future with us today and join IUPAT.
The sign hit the city like a bolt of lightning.
You know the photo. It's iconic. Marches in the streets, holding a simple sign with a simple message.
I am a man.
The I Am Story podcast explores the fight that inspired those words, how a group of sanitation workers in Memphis stood up and made history.
They don't see us as men and women.
Go to iamstory.com or wherever you get your podcasts to subscribe.
Come all you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell.
Labor creates all wealth should go to labor, and you are listening to the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison. My co-host is Adam Keller. If you've got anything to call, now the lines are open. 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857. We had forgotten to turn the lines on earlier. Whoopsie daisy, but now they're on. Now they're on, folks. So send us a text message, give us a call, and we will get you on the air. Our guest today is David Griscom, resident of Texas and co-host of Left Reckoning, a popular online left-wing political talk show. David, welcome back to the Valley Labor Report.
Dude, always happy to be here, brother. Thank you for having me.
Glad to have you on, and really excited to talk to you today. You did a and we're going to talk some about Texas and Huntsville. So let's just go into that, and then we'll talk about the big reason why I wanted to bring you on. But first, I wanted to talk to you about this stuff that Governor Abbott is doing with the with his stated intent to oh shoot, I forgot the word. What is it? Pardon a convicted murderer. The governor of Texas, supposedly tough on crime, is intending on pardoning a convicted murderer. What is going on over there?
I mean, it's truly a very clear miscarriage of justice. I mean, don't really even have to spend much time on explaining this case because it's just that egregious. And, a jury decided that as well. Back during the Black Lives Matter protests, a protester was shot and killed by somebody who drove their vehicle into the protesters, the Black Lives Matter protesters, and then discharged his firearm into Garrett Foster, killing him. It was something that is very clearly there was intent when you're sort of going into driving into protesters like that. The jury certainly agreed. And what's so frightening and upsetting about what Greg Abbott is doing is, one, Abbott's never been somebody who's been particularly interested in pardoning people in the state of Texas, right, despite many cases that have come to his desk being quite extreme. This is a very clear, political move here. I mean, Greg Abbott, now it seems like Ron DeSantis probably is the one who might be challenging Trump, but, Greg Abbott is sort of flirting with the presidential run. This is certainly an attempt, I think, for him to sort of shore up some support with some members of the far right in this country. On top of, I think the miscarriage of justice, because this is really just such a clear-cut case, in my opinion. and in the jury's opinion as well. What's really amazing about this, and I've been writing about this for Jacobin and other publications for a while, is it's another example about how Abbott is running the state. He has really concentrated tremendous power in the governor's office in ways that violate the Texas Constitution, at least in the spirit of it, of having a weak governor system where more of the power is supposed to reside in the legislature. What he's doing here is he is not just saying like, oh, if this comes to my desk, right, if a parole board sends this to my desk, I will pardon this person, right? He's telling the board that I want you to send this case to my desk, basically, you know, another assault on these, you know, supposed to be more independent bodies of Texas government. And he's been doing that across the board, across a lot of issues, and other kind of topics. But I mean, this is extremely egregious. And again, like, this case is so clear cut. Somebody came in there, drove a vehicle into protesters, and then shot one of them.
Right. And not only that, but there was intent before that has come out now, and I was kind of wondering if Abbott might backstep after these text messages were revealed, but it doesn't seem like there's been any indication that he will be doing that. But there are text messages of this guy before he goes to this protest saying, I might go to Dallas to shoot some looters. Just really fantasizing about killing somebody that he has political disagreements with.
No, I mean, that's the point about the intent. And like, I don't think that, these kind of things will dissuade Abbott, in the way that he's talking about him, about Perry, he's using his military title and things like that, trying to bestow like a bit of like honor to this, again, convicted murderer. And, like, at a certain point, you can point out hypocrisy only so much when it comes to Texas Republicans. But for somebody who's always complaining about law and order in the state and how, certain kind of policies have led Texas into a dangerous precipice of violence, to sit here and say like, well, for some folks, if I might sort of agree with their politics or I don't find their politics to be a threat, we're not going to do law and order for those folks.
Right.
It's an extremely worrying example of the overreach that we've seen from the Abbott administration since he's been in office.
Right. And we're seeing a similar situation here in Huntsville. It was with a cop, not so this fellow over in Texas wasn't a cop. He was like an Army sergeant, and he was off duty when this happened. But here in Huntsville, we had a cop convicted of murder back in 2021. He blasted this suicidal man's face with a shotgun seconds after arriving on the scene, where already on the scene were two other officers who were talking to this suicidal person, trying to get him to put down, it was a flare gun that he had pointed to his own head. He showed no signs of aggression at any time, but this fellow barked orders at him, and he didn't play Simon Says fast enough, and he blew his head off. And he was convicted of murder by a jury of his peers. And then immediately, all through the trial, Huntsville's mayor, the quote unquote union for the cops, both locally and nationally. I'm talking about the National Fraternal Order of Police president. He called into local radio defending this convicted murderer. The mayor defending a convicted murderer. Police chief defending the convicted murderer. And now he's had his conviction overturned by a court of appeals on some, whatever that basically the argument is that cops should have a lower standard for murder, that they have more leeway in murdering citizens than the rest of us do. And it's just really, really disgusting. And now he's out free. He's walking around while they wait for the trial to be reheld. This is so egregious, David, that I want you to understand. He was prosecuted by the DA's office of a right-wing Republican DA, by an attorney in the DA's office who was a former Huntsville police officer. Like, that's how egregious this was. And they're going around trying to make this out like, the DA doesn't support police. The DA doesn't support police. And it's just silly. It's, I mean, yeah, really disgusting.
Yeah, no, I mean, like,
but if you're a cop or a right winger, you can just go around murdering people, and it's fine.
Yeah, and then, like, the message it sends to certain people, particularly in a period of time where we are seeing more and more violence in this country, it is something, not to scare folks too much, but like it is something to be very worried about, and particularly in some of these cases where you're seeing like political careers being attached to some of these decisions. It's also very clear that for a certain segment of the population, for a certain segment of the political class, like it's like, all right, let's bend the law and protect murderers and criminals from punishment for their crimes, right? And again, it's ironic and it's hypocritical that it's coming from a party here that is on this crusade that the land's becoming lawless and we need law and order. Again, unless it's people who we generally support or think aren't that dangerous or bad.
Right. Law and order for thee, but not for me. And, the thing about the Huntsville case is that, of course, the taxpayers had to pay for the defense of this killer cop the entire time. We're still paying for it. And just like the case in Texas, you're seeing a really disturbing use of state power. That's a disturbing use of state power to intervene on the side of violence against citizens. It's just
and like when it comes to the police, not to be star-eyed about it, but like this is supposed to be a public service, right? This is supposed to be something that's protecting the citizens, and it's very clear that like a lot of police departments don't think of themselves as that. They think of themselves as sort of like a unique and independent body. I mean, it's a whole other conversation, but we're having a lot of questions about police oversight in the city of Austin. And one thing that's been really shocking during this fight with the police organizations and people who are pushing for less regulations and less oversight of the cops is that they're actually willing to take pay cuts if that means that they'll have less oversight. Which is just a wild thing when when a lot of the questions are about defunding or how much we're funding the police departments. When you're seeing cops basically saying like, hey, I'll take a pay cut if that means like I'm not going to have an independent board overseeing our actions. That should worry you as a citizen of that locality.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, this is what, like people will, it's obvious that I have a very pessimistic view of police in this country. And people will talk to me and they'll say, oh, don't you think it's just one or two or bad apples or whatever? And it's like, no, these are their organizations. I told you the president of the cop quote unquote union calling into local radio defending a convicted murderer. If my union president did that, I would have a problem. Right?
Yeah, I'm sure you would.
That would be an issue for me. That would be a huge issue for me if my national president is going around local radio defending convicted murderers. And these are the people, and the police chief, the mayor, these are the people that they want representing them. And so I'm allowing their representatives to represent them, and then it's not good. It's not good. If they want to, if cops in Huntsville are listening to this on the radio, and you want to oust your quote unquote union leadership to have somebody who thinks that killer cops ought to be held accountable, then that would go that would go a long way, I think, in increasing public trust. But
right, hopefully we can agree that murder is bad.
Yeah. That was, I don't know, seems like that would be a pretty good starting point. But, so David, let's talk about this other, there's some more stuff going on in Texas, and there's another connection to Alabama here, and that's with this push for school privatization. Alabama just introduced in the House of Representatives a quote unquote school choice bill. It's just meant to, suck public funds from public schools and funnel it into the pockets of, wealthy individuals and CEOs of private schools. But it's a pretty expansive bill, and there was something similar introduced in Texas that I saw was voted down in the Texas State House, but you said that it might not be quite as cut and dry as maybe I had thought. So can you explain what's going on with Texas and vouchers and privatization and where that's at over there?
Yeah, again, so basically, a lot of this, I mean, one, this is something that the Republicans in Texas have wanted to do for a while. And it's one of those things that national Republicans or people within the Republican Party, sort of ask themselves, like, why is Texas sort of behind other Republican run states on school privatization? Right? Texas has had majorities of Republicans for my entire life, pretty much. And this is a very clear attempt, I find, from Abbott to try to shore up, again, a presidential run, because he knows he'll get asked in Iowa whether or not he tried and fought hard enough for school privatization. And there was a lot of questions about how far it would be able to get, because it's been tried a few times, and it's often, and it gets blocked. Not because there's a lot of Democrats who have ability to stop it. It's because there's a lot of division within even the Republican Party in the state of Texas, particularly between Republicans who represent districts like areas like Travis County, Harris County, Dallas, right? Like these larger cities, and rural Republicans. Because, and I reckon it's probably the similar thing in Alabama. In a lot of these rural areas, the schools are important culturally and socially for people, but they're also important for people's employment, right? I mean, that's like a place that you can go and get a job, maybe as a teacher or as support staff, administrative staff, etc. So it's a very important economic engine, in particularly a lot of rural parts of Texas, and rural parts of Texas are rural. So there's always been a lot of pushback on this, and fights about things, for example, like what will happen to football teams. I mean, like, that's a big deal in this state. But effectively, all of the Republicans have been being lobbied extremely hard. There's been a lot of money spent on this issue, and the way that this privatization effort is sort of being led is that it would set up effectively, they're called education savings accounts. So each student who's already in a public school would have a set of money that's attached to them that they could take to their public school, or they could take to a private school. The problem here is that what that will do is, one, take money out of the public system. Two, will bring more money from the public system into the private system and the religious school system. And also, it's not a doorway for most working class Texans, of school age, to go to a private school, because the education savings accounts aren't enough money to pay for tuition at the nice, fancy private schools that we have in this state. On top of that, again, if you're in Travis County, if you're in Houston, if you're in San Antonio, if you're in Dallas, you have some options, right? You subsidize a few $1,000s a year. You send your kid to a private school. You get some money from the state to do that. Not really the case in a lot of rural Texas, that they have like tremendous amounts of private schools around them. So effectively, it would be lowering the amount of money that'd be going to some of these rural schools. While effectively just subsidizing wealthy families who were already probably going to take their kids and pay full tuition to private schools, take money out of the public system and basically pay it into the private system. Politically, what's happened is it went through the Texas Senate, but in the Texas House, there has been, some pushback, and there was some pushback in the Senate, but ended up passing. In the House, effectively what they did is they attached a amendment to a larger bill that they're pushing through, that basically said that the state budget won't fund school voucher system. But that's not a final bill. And it's going to go back to and the Senate can basically do a lot to sort of weaken that, and then it will return to the House, where it seems pretty. I mean, I don't want to make predictions here, because Texas politics moves really fast sometimes. Right. But effectively, what that signaling is, what that vote was saying, is that a lot of rural Republicans aren't happy with the way that the language of the school voucher program is currently set up. They want to get more, concessions, more promises of how much funding will go to some of those rural schools, and things of that nature. So this is such a big priority for the Republican Party that I sort of, I wouldn't be too optimistic that House amendment is basically the end of the school voucher push. A lot of the smarter people who I talk about who follow the ledger really closely think that there will be in some form or another, some form of school vouchers that will go to Abbott's desk during the session, and he has obviously been pushing for it and has pledged to sign it. So it's not done. But it's also not blocked. Despite, I mean, hell, just a minute, I was excited when I saw that news too, friend. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, and
sorry, it's like, and the way that it's set up is really wild too, because like, there's a lot of pushes to say that you can also take that money for homeschooling to just sort of, there's been some proposals that basically it's just like, this is just money.
Right. And that's more like the Alabama version that's being discussed. It's very open-ended.
Yeah, you can just take money and do whatever you want with it, right? So it's like you're taking money out of the public school. Yeah, it's really egregious. And as somebody who, went to Texas public schools, I mean, it's worrying because Texas has some really great schools. It also has a lot of underfunded schools, and the reason that these things are so nasty, apart from maybe some of the things that I think that as a society it's a good thing to educate children. I think it's actually something we should be proud of, that we provide that to children, right? And we should want to provide the best education to our kids and the next generation. The way that this is set up, it basically will pull more and more money out of underfunded, poor working class communities, and will super fund the already really, really well-off communities in Texas. And I don't know, that's not something that I can get behind.
Yeah, and it only feeds that cycle, right? Because the more the public schools are underfunded, the more demand you have for voucher programs, right? The more legitimate grievances people will have, the more families will look for alternatives. It's a really vicious cycle where the public schools that are meant to serve, yes, predominantly working class communities, are sabotaged from the inside out, while, yes, funneling public dollars from the public treasury into private pockets. It's
and just adding to that, just right now, there's a massive teacher shortage in the state of Texas. Teachers have seen significant war on their wages and livelihood and life. I mean, quite literally. And the kind of weasel word that you're hearing from a lot of the Texas GOP right now, people who are supporting it, is that every school in Texas will be fully funded, right? But again, what does fully funded mean? Does that mean that the funding is going to lower, right? I mean, that fits in that kind of rhetoric.
Because when has it ever been fully funded? Right. By a legitimate measurement of needs.
Yeah. No, they're just I mean, so fully funded could mean literally anything. One of the big advocates and lobbyists, but we call them what they are, has been using Obama's Obamacare line, which is if you like your public school, you can keep it. But honestly, I don't think you can generally make that promise to people.
Right. No, you can't.
Looking at some of the proposals that have been laid out, and looking at some of the consequences that are very likely to come from this.
Right, exactly, and that's the consequences that are going to come from this. That is something that is so frustrating to me when I see people falling for this, because I think that there are just normal working families, and I think this will actually kind of lead into the next conversation. But there's working families, they want their children to be well educated, and they're being sold this bill of goods that, if we have competition in the education marketplace, we're going to empower you as consumers of education, and it's ultimately, not only is it going to give you more choice and you're going to be able to maybe take your kid to this fancy ass private school, but it'll also make the public schools better because they're going to have to compete with these fancy ass private schools in a way that they don't have to right now. And so they say all these things, and they try to make working class people, they try to convince working folks that privatization is actually going to increase educational outcomes in their communities. But they make all these fancy hypothetical arguments, and they talk in highfalutin up in the clouds language, but the thing that's frustrating to me, and we know why, right, is that they never ever point to results. They never do that. Because they can't. Because it's not as if we exist, we are floating alone in the ether in Alabama as a state. We are not the only people who have ever existed. And there are states in this country that have implemented exactly the same kind of programs that you're talking about in Texas and that they're talking about in Alabama. And we can just look at the results, and they're not good. They're not good. We've talked about how, you said that it's going to funnel money into people that are already into the pockets of wealthy people that are already sending their kids to private schools. That's not a hypothetical, maybe this is going to happen, maybe that's not. We can look at the results. 70 to 80% of these funds go to parents who are already sending their kids to private schools. It's not increasing choice. It's just funneling money into their pockets. We can also look at the educational outcomes. They do not increase in public schools in states where this is tried, and they do not actually even increase the educational outcomes of people who utilize these vouchers by and large. And which is a crazy statistic, but it's been studied and we can see that. But but these advocates, these lobbyists who are paid by these interests that are interested in enriching their friends who are sending their kids to private schools, or who maybe are interested in owning private schools themselves.
Yeah.
They're trying to
that's the thing is
folks.
let's be clear about this. This is saying that right now we have a generally public system in this country where the majority of kids are going to public schools. And there's people who want to make money off of that process. Well, how can I start making money off of children's education? Well, we get rid of public schools and we increase the amount of money that's going to private interest, right? Like this is like beyond like what it means for educational outcomes. Like let's always you got to follow the money. Why is there concerted interest? Is it because a bunch of wealthy folks are particularly worried about educational outcomes for children? Or is it because there's a really nice market opportunity? If you have a massive state like Texas, basically funding a lot of private opportunities that you can grift and graft off of.
Yeah. Amen.
Exactly. And so the main point of discussion that I wanted to talk about, and we kind of spoke to it there, is this idea of folks voting against their own interests, quote unquote. This is something that we see lobbed at folks in red states, folks who vote against unions, in more and less good faith ways, more and less respectful of these people. In some cases we can see, unironically liberal elites, these, fancy lawyers, right, from out of state looking at people in Alabama and saying, these hicks, they just don't know anything. They don't know even to vote in their own interests. But then we do see good-natured and good faith criticisms from people who just literally don't understand. And in some cases that's me, right? I don't understand how people can do these certain things that it seems to me are directly opposed to their material interests. And you talked about that on one of your solo streams for Left Reckoning a week and a half ago, I think it was. What was your main point in that Griscom stream?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few things in here. I mean, basically, this whole voting against their interest thing that I think has become like a popular, I don't know, slogan or term. I think sort of misses like the point of American politics. For example, like when people talk about voting against their interest, one thing they always cite is a book called "What's the Matter with Kansas," right? And no one ever talks about the book. They say the title, right? And I've always found that funny because if you read the book, what that book is about is how the Democratic Party in the state of Kansas, like many other states, started turning their backs on working people and not really fighting for them, not really providing them much. And how that created opportunities for the right to pick up voters. So this idea that, like, for example, when you see a party that's like not really standing up for working people, to say, oh, if you're not supporting them, then you're sort of like working against your own interests, I think is a misguided understanding of politics. I'm somebody who believes in working class people and in working class politics, and we don't see that across the country, frankly, when it comes to the two major political parties for the most part, and the vast majority of political candidates. So the question that we have, as people who want to fight for workers, people who want to fight for union members, people who want to really build working class power in this country, is how can we build vehicles that can deliver those results, right? That's a big conversation, big question. This thing about ideology, I think, is an important starting point, because one thing that's really frustrating, and a lot of this stuff I've been really influenced by a thinker and writer, Vivek Chibber, on it, is that effectively when you don't have avenues for working class politics, right, working class organizations that are able to flex their muscle and win direct results for people, how do you engage with the world? How do you engage with politics? Primarily as an individual, right? Maybe sometimes as a part of like another group, right? Maybe racially, culturally, etc., socially, etc. And I think that's a bad result. I'm not saying that that's a good thing, but that's people acting in a particular interest that they have, right? And the question that, like, people again who want to build working class politics have to do is like, well, how can we build a vehicle or movement that like represents those interests, so that people are saying, this is the group, this is the organization, these are the people that I know have my back, I can participate in that and get real results for myself. And like, it's one thing that, like, it's really frustrating because you see lefties that basically they'll talk about the working class as this, in this country, as if they're just like tremendously confused about the world. They don't understand their interests. Like, maybe even not even talking about voting for a second. Let's talk about another group of people that like wealthy liberals love to attack, right? Non-voters, right? Well, most there's a really great kind of in-depth interview program that they did here in Texas about the non-voters, because there's a lot of non-voters in the state of Texas. They were asking people, like, what do you think? People were saying, like, what would you like to see in politics? They say things like, we want more regulations on big financial firms, we want universal health care, we want higher wages, we want more workers protections. And then there's a section of like a liberal class will be like, yeah, exactly, so why are you not voting? Well, it's like, a lot of those people, for example, were like former Obama voters, right? And they saw what happened to their life after participating and voting for somebody like that, and it was very disappointing, very demobilizing for folks. So why? Right? Why like buoy the career of somebody else who doesn't really seem to want to be fighting for you and like your direct interests? Why participate in that thing, right? Again, like, I think that we should be building movements that get people out to vote, right? And the way you do that, by the way, is getting candidates and people running for office who actually will fight for working people. I'm not saying that that's like the end all be all, that like just because people think this way that like there's no reason in pushing or having conversations, etc. But like, understand that's a very rational decision to make, in my opinion, right? Another one too is just like, like, we're all big fans of unions, for example, right? We think unions are really important. But for a lot of people, if you're in an non-unionized workplace, right, going up and trying to go through that process and winning a union is really hard, and you can get beat, right? So like, when somebody says, I'm hesitant about this, I'm worried about this, I don't think that this might work for me, right? Again, it's not saying that that's like the end all be all. It's saying that's a very reasonable look at the state of labor in this country, the way that the deck is rigged against working people, right? And it's like a real important mentality shift, I think, to say that, like, no, most people are rational, most people are intelligent, most people understand what's happening around them. I mean, like, like, y'all are all from the South, exactly what this is like. The way that other people talk about this region is completely unreflective of like what it actually exists. You talk to normal people, and what do they say? bosses are screwing us, the system's rigged against us, like people generally understand that they're being exploited, right?
Right.
And there's a whole section, I think, of like the left, and I'm including even like people sort of even in our orbit, right, who think that like the reason that we don't have, for example, like a working class party or strong labor movement in this country is because ideology, people are so bamboozled about these things, versus like the actual material reality that like these movements have been thoroughly beaten into the ground. The deck is the game is really rigged against them. And I'm not saying we can't do these things, but if you come from an understanding that basically the reason we don't have these things is because people have like the wrong ideas, or that they're just so confused by the world, you're never going to get out of this situation that we're currently in. And you look at like class de-alignment in this country, mainly like how a lot of traditionally more like union communities have like moved from maybe being solidly Democratic voters in other parts of the country to maybe voting for Trump in 2016 or in 2020. And you see that like a lot of the things that people were saying is like, there's one interest is like, well, there's a wealthy group of people in my state, and I want to do something that hinders them or pisses them off, right? I'm like, it's not going to get the results that are that people need or even want. But like, these people have been screwing you over, put two middle fingers up to them or whatever, right? Like again, like it's like there's a lot more rationality and purpose behind these things than folks think. Another one is like what Trump got a lot of movement for was like talking about immigration. And I'm somebody who thinks that immigration is something important. We should be supporting immigrants. But if what capitalism does is it pits working people against each other, right?
Right.
That's like the reason that we're in this mess, is because we're not united as a class of people who labor. We're pitted against each other in different sections of the working class. So if you're seeing people who are able to, come into your community and be hired, they're waging war against them. And I'm not saying that's a good thing, but like it's coming much more from like a material place than, just sort of like, pure irrationality. And what our job is to change the material politics, where people recognize that like, that immigrant labor that's like lives down the street from me is actually subjected to the same exploitation that I am, and I have a hell of a lot more to gain from joining up with them and taking on the bosses than I do about waging war against my neighbor. But again, the engine, like the motivation for a lot of that stuff comes from like a material reality that is put upon people with that desired result. Do you know what I mean? Like the immigration stuff that happens in this country, the immigration fights that happen, the desired result is to create chaos and conflict within the working class against each other. And again, its genesis is like from the system that we have. And if you don't recognize that, then the arguments that you are going to be making are going to be rooted in that material fact. And you're not really going to find a way out of it, because look, there are a lot of different identities that you can have as an American, right? That aren't just being a worker, right? You can be a Southerner, you can be a white person, right? You can be a woman, a man, right? And like the idea behind working class politics is that we are recognized that there's something very universal about working class existence. And that has the ability to actually tie together a lot of different identities and a lot of different groups. But in the absence of that, groups are going to act as part of those other groups, right? And again, like you got to think about why these things are existing versus just sort of thinking that like, oh, it's because people are stupid or people are confused if you want to change them.
Right. And that's and it's, certainly easier said than done, because there is something of a prisoner's dilemma there, right?
Yeah.
Because there is you mentioned in the union context, in the organizing context, there is actually like a real material interest to sure not voting for the union, but even potentially being an active campaign.
Yeah, we're being a
right?
scab, right? That's like that's like you're getting paid for that, you know.
Right.
And again, like I just want to be really clear that like because sometimes people get confused with what I'm saying. I'm not saying these things are good,
right?
That they exist. What I'm saying is that
understand the context,
right? Because if we do want and we want a working class movement, I think it is important to believe, like you said, that you know, most people are rational and most people understand their interests, and so the way that our society is pushing us to think is as atomized individuals. And so if we think about our and this is what I the reason I wanted to bring you on to talk about this, because I think it's so important that if you only think about yourself in your workplace that's forming a union as an atomized individual, much like in, you know, all these thought experiments, you as an individual do potentially have some material interest in opposing the union. But if instead we shift if we try to shift a person's analysis from their individual to the collective, then they can begin to see that, oh, you know, it's actually it's also in my material interest to be part of this union and to be part of this of finding the boss and taking more from the boss and taking more of the value that I create. And it's you know, in the political arena, it is in my material interest to come together with my sisters and brothers who may or may not be originally from this country to all of us fight for better wages and working conditions. You know, the shifting your analysis from the individual to the collective is the important thing. But that's a difficult thing to do, right? Is to and so what are some of the ways that you've thought through to try to nudge people into thinking more in terms of community and as a collective?
Totally. I mean, like, there's rhetorical stuff, and look, I'm like a professional talker, so it's not like I don't have ideas about like how to make an argument about why being a union is good, you know, why fighting for working class politics is good, all of that kind of stuff. But at a certain point, I've become more and more convinced that, again, I'm not saying that stuff's unimportant. Look, I do like a politics show because I have, you know, I think that it's worthwhile to be out there to engage in those ideas and to meet people where they're at and talk about, you know, these things with them. But really what I think a lot of this has to do is building capacity. And what I mean by that is like actually showing people and building movements, if it's a strong labor movement, if it's a strong political movement, that showing up and participating in these things actually can win. Right. And it's one of those things that like you hit this wall, right? Because to win, you have to get people on your side before you can win. Right. And, you know, what I say to that is like there have always been and there always will be, you know, people who come first. Right. Like people who show up first because they come into that realization sort of early, and they say they're committed to the struggle, saying like, I'm willing to put, you know, potentially make, you know, significant sacrifices to win these victories for my coworkers, for the class, for my community. Right. But like, if you want to change these things, it's showing people that like politics and that labor activity can change their lives for the better. And the way you do that is by winning. You know, an example of this is that like, you know, I still am a big supporter of like Green New Deal policy, right? I think that like what we should do is we should say to the working people in this country who have been fueling and powering our society that, you know, your service is incredibly valuable, your knowledge is incredibly valuable, and we want y'all to help us build this transition. Which means things like wage guarantees, a job guarantee that like even if we might close a coal plant, you know, you can work in the renewable industry, and we're going to change the renewable industry because as people who work in that industry know, unfortunately the wind and solar industry right now is pretty egregious in the way that they pay and treat workers. You know, just transition where if you're working in, you know, in like a heavily fossil fuel industry, that, you know, we'll have security for you that like, one, we want you to work in the transition, but two, we're just not going to put people out of the job. right? It could be something as simple as like wage guarantees, like during training programs for different kinds of work, right? Anyways, I like all these policies, right? But and I talk to friends and people who work in those industries, and they like those policies too. And the retort that you get from folks is like, I like that, I just don't see that as something that is possible, right? And that, again, is like a very reasonable thing. So it's not that these people are like, oh, they're so confused about the world, they don't understand the world. It's a very like, clear-eyed, it's pessimistic, don't get me wrong, but clear-eyed look at like what's happened in American politics over the past few decades, that like good things are really hard to win. So like what we have to be sort of focusing on is how can we show up and fight for people in their like immediate struggles that they're in, try to push back and win some of these games. I mean, like that's things like showing up to labor actions. That means showing up and supporting people when they're on strike, showing up and supporting people during union campaigns, right? And building those kind of real connections with workers versus just sort of this very condescending wagging of the finger that we get from a lot of the left right now when it comes to working class people. Like it's like the for me, like this is where I'm at like politically right now. Like the only question that I really like care about in the sense I think is like productive in a lot of ways is like, how can we start to build capacity to take the way that people feel, which is that they're being exploited, that like their boss is screwing them, that these corporations are screwing them, that the political system doesn't care about them. How do we build the capacity to show people that there is another way? And that's hard work. It's not even as fun as like just doing an argument, right? Or like creating good rhetoric or media about it, but like that's sort of where we're at, because it is building that capacity, or it is just like a constant cycle of maybe small victories and then just collapse, right? And just going through this cycle that has been sort of the cycle of working class politics in this country for the vast majority of its history.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you're speaking to a lot there. And a couple of things that really stood out to me is like you're speaking to the importance of relationships that are built through struggle. And I think that is a dynamic that is very powerful when harnessed and when we see it happening. And I think to maybe throw in a more spiritual side to this, I think love is important. And is an important part of this kind of movement and this kind of effort, being rooted in love and treating people in good faith and approaching people in good faith. That's very important. And, solidarity is just love expressed socially, right? It's just like our society version of love, the communal form of it. And so I think what you're talking about in terms of showing up for each other's struggles, that is huge, and just helping each other out and building those connections and continually growing the network. But by showing up for each other, that really goes a long way. Even if it's for folks that you don't truly understand 100%, or maybe it's not, your normal crowd per se, whatever the situation may be, if someone has a righteous cause and you can be on the side of justice, why not? Why not do that? And I think the more we do that, the stronger our networks become.
Totally. And like, I mean, I totally agree. And like, you look, we just had Paul Prescott on our show, who is an organizer with the Teamsters for Democratic Union, on to talk about Tony Mazzocchi, who is like a very legendary labor leader. And like so many of the great things that he was able to achieve came out of like actually building that community within his union, right? Having things like they had, like, this is like in the 50s, so it might seem a little antiquated, but they had like a really raucous bowling league,
Nice.
Where people were able to like have fun and know their coworkers. They had like a very vigorous, reading group and study group, with a bunch of people who like weren't college educated, were reading, the classics, reading, working class theory and politics. And like being able to reckon with them and understand them, and work through them. There's a whole other conversation, but there's another segment I find on like the left, even, which is a sad thing, that sort of acts like working people are sort of incapable engaging in history and politics and literature, something that again I find to be extremely condescending. But no, I mean, totally, like building community is just as important part of that work, in a lot of ways, just as important as building up the like the political engine and structures that are needed to sort of win those victories on the legislative level.
Well, and speaking about Mazzocchi, he was the president of the OCAW, the Oil, Chemical, and Atomic Workers Union. And he was able to, as president of this union representing oil and nuclear workers, to advocate for decarbonization and anti-nuclear anti-nuclear weapons politics, not anti-nuclear energy. Nuclear energy, I think we're generally cautiously pro-nuclear energy on the show.
Good.
But anti-nuclear weapons, and so if you're thinking even individually, but for this group, for just this group, decarbonization, oil workers supporting decarbonization, that's against their interests, right? You're not even thinking, we're not even thinking individually. We're thinking about these people as a group, but they were even able to go beyond, we have this group of oil workers and we have a common interest. They expanded that circle of interest to the globe, to the world, to the country at minimum, and saying like, no, it's actually in our material interest to decarbonize, which is, this is even another step beyond. But that's something that's incredibly impressive that Mazzocchi was able to do, and that that is difficult to imagine.
You did that by winning and by building trust.
Yeah,
right.
And it's something that's difficult to imagine in this environment because. I remember David writing an article for The Nation about how we don't need more military spending. We need, green union jobs for working people. And he said that he got he got some flack from his international, right? And it's because they're like stuck in this, I don't know. I don't want to get too far off on that tangent, but yeah, it's Mazzocchi's incredible character.
Yeah, I mean, and he had was able to walk that line and do a lot of things that the environmental movement has been sort of bad at. He has a line that I first came across from Matt Huber's excellent book Class War, Climate Change as Class War. But I'm paraphrasing here, but it's like we should treat workers just as well as we treat dirt. And what he meant by that is that whenever industry changes, we have tremendous amounts of funding to go to sort of clean up industrial sites and to fix up the soil, but we don't have those kind of policies for workers in those industries, right? I mean, I think that that's somebody that is definitely worth your time in engaging with his work. If you're unfamiliar. But yeah, I mean, generally, I just think that if we don't get more serious about what it's going to take to be building a working class movement, then it's just these are just intellectual exercises and debates, and we're having fun. And don't get me wrong, I love spirited debate and all that kind of stuff. But at this point, knowing what's going on for working people in this country, we need much, much more than that. And I think a lot of people should sort of take a look in the mirror and think about. Look, I mean, I think that we should defend ourselves as a left and as a working class movement, certainly. But when you see that we're not winning, you need to start looking in the mirror and saying, what are we doing that's not working, right? If your response to why isn't there enough class mobilization in this country is that working people are confused or stupid or don't understand themselves, you will never win. And you probably shouldn't, honestly, if that's your thought process about the general person in this country.
David Griscom, co-host of Left Reckoning, appreciate your time. We went a little bit over, but I appreciate it. It was a good talk.
Yeah, of course. Always happy to do it, friends.
Thanks so much, brother.
All right.
Take care.
Check him out on YouTube at Left Reckoning. Really good stuff. And I super enjoyed that conversation that he had with Paul Prescott as well. Like he said, organizer with TDU, talked about Tony Mazzocchi. Really, really good conversation. Always good stuff happening over there at Left Reckoning. So check him out. We're going to go to a break really quick and be right back. If you want to give us a comment as we round out the show, the phone number is 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857. We're going to be right back.
There's a lot of talk about a shortage of workers, but that's not the case with IBW 558. We have provided our customers over 3,000 workers and performed over 3 million man-hours in a pandemic year. With 8,000 OJT hours, 900 classroom hours, OSHA 30, and a state license, our members receive the equivalent of a master's degree. That's what makes IBW 558 the right choice for your electrical needs. Look us up at Facebook or at IBW558.org.
Support for this program is provided by the International Association for Machinists and Aerospace Workers, Local Lodge 44 in Decatur, Alabama. Learn more at IAMAW44.org.
Support for this program also comes from the Iron Workers, Local 477. So if you are looking for contractors with lower than average EMR and TRIR, they tell me that if you need to know what those mean, then you will. Or if you need to supplement a workforce at any level for any amount of time, short or long term, if you need iron workers that come trained and certified at no extra cost, or if you need workers from superintendent down to general laborer, and you're looking to start work on a project, or you're unhappy with your current contractor situation, you need to call my friend Jeb Miles with the Iron Workers Local 477. They only work with the best in the business, vetted contractors, and can do all kinds of jobs from roofing to steel and bridge erection, from welding to heavy rigging, from structural repairs to machinery alignment, and much more. They supply manpower on 4 of the 5 largest projects in North Alabama, so you know they're legit. If you need good quality, safe, efficient, diligent, and knowledgeable workers on your job, then you need the Iron Workers Local 477. Call Jeb Miles at 256-383-3334 or via email at local477@bellsouth.net, and make sure you tell them that you heard about them on the Valley Labor Report.
We're the nurses, firefighters, and claims representatives that help keep our government services running. We respond to natural disasters. We care for our nation's veterans, and we investigate discrimination in the workplace. We are federal and D.C. government workers, and we are proud to serve the American people. Working in more than 70 agencies across the government, we know we can fulfill our mission because our union has our back. Learn more at afge.org. Paid for by the American Federation of Government Employees, AFL-CIO.
The Laborers International Union of North America, Local 366, is proudly recruiting North Alabama workers to work construction and nuclear plant maintenance. If you're interested, please contact Donna at their training center to start the process. That phone number is 256-415-7452. Again, that phone number is 256-415-7452. No experience is needed. Free training is offered, but you must be able to pass a background check and a drug test. Local hiring that grows our community with good-paying jobs that have benefits is their mission. Live better, work union, Local 366, feel the power.
Support for this program also comes from the Mid-South Council of Retail, Wholesale, and Department Store Union. Learn more at rwdsu.info.
Do you work in an auto manufacturing plant? Are you tired of taking pride in your work without getting the respect you deserve? Consider joining the fight to unionize. Auto workers across the industry are coming together because with a union, we can negotiate for the pay, benefits, and security that we deserve and can help sustain our families. In union plants, workers bargain for long-term wage increases, competitive bonuses, and more affordable benefits. You can join the growing wave of organizing today. Find out more and contact us at Uniting Auto Workers on Facebook or contact UAW Region 8 in Lebanon, Tennessee by going to www.uawregion8.net. That's www.uawregion8.net. A better future is ours.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell.
Alabama's only union talk radio show. This is the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison, here with my co-host Adam Keller. We appreciate you taking the time to listen. Appreciate the conversation in the chat from Infinite Content, Vex the Cat, DL Cinderow, Army Mobility Officer, Will talking about his local Teamsters union over in Anaheim, California being fired up for contract negotiations. We're excited to hear about that. Pepino Nation, Jose, also a Teamster in California. He was interviewed for the Upsurge podcast. Check that out. It is a podcast specifically about the UPS Teamsters negotiations and what UPS Teamsters go through. Highly recommend it. It is done by the very talented Teddy Ostro and features a regular viewer and commenter in the chat, so we appreciate that. And as well as conversations from Flair Child. We got a $5 super chat from Christopher Cotton. Keep up the good work. Thank y'all. Thank you, Chris.
Yeah, really appreciate that.
And as always, Joe and Mel in the Facebook chat. Appreciate y'all tuning in and supporting us every day, every week. So, Adam, you have you've got a small update about domestic workers, right?
Yeah, I wanted to hit this before we wrap up this morning. So the National Domestic Workers Alliance has put out a statement on the White House proclamation recognizing April as Care Worker Recognition Month. So back on March 31st, right before the start of the month, the Biden-Harris administration announced a White House proclamation declaring April as Care Worker Recognition Month, highlighting the administration's continued commitment to strengthening the care economy and marking a critical step forward for direct care workers, caregivers, early childhood educators, and child care workers to live and work with the respect and recognition they deserve. Now, me personally, I'm interested to hear more about what the administration's supposedly doing about the care economy. However, I am willing to recognize that this recognition is itself important. It's important that we have this month to recognize domestic workers who are often under-recognized in this country. And that's why the National Domestic Workers Alliance is excited to see a month dedicated to the workers who care for our loved ones and national acknowledgement of what care workers have known all along, that care is essential and care can't wait. The president and executive director of NDWA put out the following statement. We celebrate the Biden-Harris administration's decision to proclaim April as Care Worker Recognition Month. For decades, we have known that care workers are the engine of our economy and society, enabling our families to thrive by ensuring our loved ones are cared for with respect and dignity. Now it's time for the rest of the country to see what we see. It's time we recognize care work and thank care workers for the life-enabling work they do. This proclamation represents a turning point in our country. Public recognition of work often invisibilized and undervalued, made possible by the women of color who have organized for decades to achieve transformational change in the care industry. We are thrilled to have a dedicated month for the workers who make everything else possible, and we welcome the opportunity to thank them on a national stage. And this April, we must go beyond acknowledgement. We must recommit to real change. America's care workers provide the care needed for older adults and people with chronic illnesses or disabilities to live independently and with dignity. They provide enriching environments for our children to grow and learn, and they understand the critical human connection necessary to provide care for our loved ones. With a growing aging population, American families need more support than ever, driving a rapid growth in the number of care jobs. Yet they too often earn poverty wages without benefits or adequate time off and struggle to make ends meet. The workers we count on to care for us struggle to care for their own families. We can't recognize care workers without recognizing that reality. That is why this April, we will also be recommitting to action to make care jobs the living wage jobs they deserve. May this proclamation pave the way for generational change in the quality of these jobs. May we achieve investments in home and community-based services to raise wages for the workforce, pass a national domestic worker bill of rights, and put these jobs on a path to real economic opportunity and mobility. We join the nation in celebrating and thanking our care workers and look forward to amplifying the stories and power of care work all month and beyond. So I wanted to put that out there because, as their statement alluded to, domestic workers are just often forgotten about in our economy. Often they are not treated as employees legally. Often they do not have paid sick leave or any sort of paid benefits. Often are working without retirement benefits or, living wages, frankly. And so these are people who are doing very important work, doing work that we rely on, that families across the country rely on. The people who are taking care of our elders, taking care of our sick and our injured and our disabled. So it's very important that these be good jobs, that these be union jobs, that these be jobs that are sustainable so that folks can have a family and have a decent life of dignity while doing this important work. So wanted to recognize this statement from the National Domestic Workers Alliance.
Awesome. And with that, we're going to go ahead and wrap up this show with our plugs. Just some reminders. Check out the April 6th episode of America's Workforce Radio because Adam was on it.
That's right.
Adam was on it talking about Shop Talk, talking about Warrior Met, and talking about the Atlanta Opera. The North Alabama Area Labor Council has a barbecue, folks, next weekend. And we're going to be strategizing some after the show about exactly how we're going to be handling this because it is on Saturday. It is on April 22nd. It's on Earth Day from 11 to 4 at Braun Spring Park Pavilion 1. Braun Spring Park Pavilion 1, Saturday, April 22nd, 11 to 4. Union members, allies, non-union members, anybody that wants, come on out. We're going to have free food, good folks, good times. It's going to be great. Really looking forward to it. The grand opening of the Automotive Free Clinic is today at 1 p.m. That's Saturday, April 15th at 1259B South Memorial Drive, Prattville, Alabama. 36067. It's going to include live music and food. So if you're over there in the Montgomery area, then you can go ahead and head on over.
Yeah, and don't forget to check out our interview from a few months back with Zach, who is the director there of the Automotive Free Clinic.
Yep. As they do each month, our friends at Labor Notes are hosting a series of online trainings. If you're looking to learn how to get involved in your union or just activism in general, highly recommend you check it out. The Steward's Workshop Assertive Grievance Handling is the next one, and it is on April 19th. Don't forget that our new weekly series called Shop Talk, airing online on Thursday mornings, is up and running now. Shop Talk is dedicated to labor education, history, and training. Check out the live stream on Thursdays at 9:30 a.m. Central, or the podcast comes out the following Monday at 5 a.m. And if you're not already on our email list at tvlr.fm, folks, you got to sign up for that. Go to tvlr.fm/contact and let us know whether you want to be on the daily or the weekly update. We accommodate however much you want us to bug you. We will happily oblige. It's going to send all of our new content directly to your inbox. Folks, you can give us a call, 844-899-TVLR. That is 844-899-8857 as we go into overtime. Or you can leave us a voicemail throughout the week, buy our merch, or give us money at tvlr.fm/store and tvlr.fm/donate. donate. Don't forget, if you are watching the stream right now, like, subscribe, and share the show. We're going to be heading into overtime, where we're going to be talking to Lee Harris from the American Prospect about the CHIPS Act and the lack of labor protections, in particular in Arizona. So definitely stay tuned for that. Really
kind of a Western themed show today.
Absolutely. Really looking forward to that. And we're going to be playing a couple of clips from the Rutgers strike. They had huge news with a tentative agreement just announced yesterday. So looking forward to talking about that and maybe getting on a Rutgers person to be in conversation with a union grad worker in Alabama for the next show. So stay tuned for that. We're going to go ahead and head into overtime. So stay tuned. And if you don't come into overtime with us, we'll see you next week. All power to the workers.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell.
All right. I think we're off the radio now.
Awesome. All right. Yeah, folks, we're off the radio. Appreciate you hanging out with us. Yeah. Appreciate you hanging out with us into overtime. We've got some great stuff lined up for you in overtime, particularly looking forward to the conversation with Lee Harris about the CHIPS Act and labor. So we're going to go ahead and take a short break, and we're going to be right back.
Come on, you poor workers, good news to you I'll tell, how the good old union has come in here to dwell.
Welcome back. We are now in overtime, still listening to the Valley Labor Report, Alabama's only union talk radio program. We're now in overtime, the second half of the program. We are online only, gotten rid of the FCC censors, and we've got some good stuff for you today. We got a couple more super chats over the break. $5 from Union Joe, $4.99 from Vex the Cat. Appreciate that. Definitely, very much appreciate support of the show. So let's start off with this Rutgers stuff. This is really, really cool. We were going to try to get in conversation a union grad worker from Alabama with one of the striking workers from Rutgers, but it wasn't. We weren't able to make the get the schedules to mesh. But I think we're going to be able to do it for the next show. However, we do that, probably pre-taping it, so be looking forward to that next weekend. But we do want to go ahead and bring you this news, and that is that after a 5-day strike, I believe it was, that included pictures of frat bros supporting the strike. It is now, it has been called off. They're returning to work on Monday after a tentative agreement that they're going to continue ironing out some of the details. So they called it a, quote, tentative framework. They're going to go ahead and go back to work on Monday while they iron out the final details. But it includes a 48% pay increase for adjunct faculty by 2025, a 33% increase for TAs and GAs, and a $40,000 salary for them in 2025. Presumptively renewable contracts, job security for adjunct faculty, and protection against caste discrimination. This is from Rebecca Given, president of one of the unions that were involved in the strike. The strike involved, I think, 3 unions at Rutgers. Also involved in the strike, the construction workers unions refused to cross the picket lines and did not continue working on construction projects while the strike was going on. So really, really cool stuff. And we've got a couple of videos here to show you the energy that was present during some of these strike demonstrations. Let's play the first one, Adam. That's pretty cool. And if you're just listening to the audio, I think the audio enough is really cool to listen to, but the visuals are amazing too. I mean, hundreds of people, coming together, just super happy. You can tell they're like gearing up to win. And that energy is the same in the second clip. Let's go ahead and play that.
Gonna take it. No, we ain't gonna take it. We're not gonna take it anymore. We're not gonna take it. No, we ain't gonna take it. We're not gonna.
Yeah. So I really love it. Absolutely love it. That was really cool. I enjoyed seeing those on Twitter.
Yeah, and solidarity to the Rutgers workers, and shout out for fighting this courageous fight. I know the administration has been less than pleasant to deal with. I think that's putting it mildly, but y'all have been persevering, and it looks like it's going to pay off. So
yeah, I would say so. Nearly a 50% wage increase in 1 year.
Yeah, and I think it's important that this wave of organizing continue to spread from campus to campus across the country. There's so many folks in academia that are working at poverty wages, who are struggling to make ends meet. These are folks that are doing important work and are working with students, or people who are students who are trying to better themselves in their communities. It's time to treat these folks right, and let's hope that what happened at Rutgers can continue to spread.
Absolutely. And that's one of the somebody else mentioned this on Twitter, and I can't remember who it was, but that probably just the direct impacts of the strike are huge, for these people immediately, these huge raises and job security. That's really, really big. But also, for most of these people, these graduate workers, this is temporary employment. They're not going to be here but for another 2 or 3 or 4, maybe 5 years. And then they're going to go out into other workplaces having known the value that unions bring. That Being a part of a union is so important, and you can win, and they have that knowledge going out, and so each one of these people are hopefully going to be seeds in all the other workplaces that they go to throughout their career.
Spreading the good news.
So,
and I think that's really cool to see folks experiencing the power of solidarity. And I think that translates. I think it won't just stay at Rutgers. Those folks will circulate throughout the country, and they're going to bring that experience and that feeling that they had. They're going to bring that with them, and who knows where that'll lead. But it's exciting, and it's great to see some victories.
Right.
It's easy to get dispirited sometimes in our movement because we are facing so much, and the task in front of us is so monumental. But there we go. Great job by Rutgers faculty and staff fighting the good fight.
Yeah, absolutely. Vex the Cat in the chat says, if you cross the picket line, that's a party foul.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely.
And I saw Vonda McDaniel in the chat. Happy A. Philip Randolph birthday. That's very cool. I didn't realize that it was A. Philip Randolph's birthday.
Nice.
I just happened to see a tweet of hers on Twitter where she had shared an article about code switching in reference to Justin Pearson, the Tennessee lawmaker who people have been pretending to be angry about because he has, he has a preacher voice in his speeches now, whereas they say that he didn't in a campaign video for student government president 7 years ago.
When he was a kid.
He was a kid. And but also, they are different contexts, right? You're running for student government president, and you're in an ad. It's not like you're doing a speech, you're just in an ad speaking, and this is a different context. And the people that are pretending to be upset about that is just wild, especially to me coming from a white Pentecostal tradition where the preacher voice phenomenon was well known. It was so well known that it would be commented upon, like, because it would sometimes take a while for them to transition. They
gotta get warmed up.
Yeah,
sometimes.
They gotta get warmed up, and so so Brother Ricky would come to the pulpit and he's starting to talk like in his normal voice, and then he starts getting louder and then louder, and then you'd hear, oh, the preacher's come, the preacher's here now, and and so the idea, the people pretending that it's disingenuous to have different rhetoric in different situations was very, very...
Yeah, it's like I told you yesterday when you mentioned this to me, like, just because you don't have that talent doesn't mean other people don't. Just because you can't imagine that doesn't mean other people can't.
Right.
And, there's also a lot of manufactured outrage in this society.
Yeah. Commenting on the Rutgers strike, Alex in the chat says, in the mid-2010s, I tried to live in Boston as a grad student. The stipend they paid me covered half my rent and basic groceries and expenses. Very little was left. I didn't know you were supposed to be independently wealthy.
Right. And
that's one of the problems, right? That's one of the issues, is that for so many of these positions in the upper crust of society, you have to have been independently wealthy,
Right, and that's the way, class hierarchy repeats itself, and that's the way these institutions kind of gatekeep out working class people. And, that's why these labor struggles in university campuses is so important, right? Because these are workers involved. I know it's not maybe the traditional terrain of a labor struggle, right? It's not a factory floor, but there are workers involved, and the more these workers can get paid a living wage, the more they can have benefits that are actually respectable and can make a living and a decent living doing this. That's what's important. So we can have diversity in these institutions as well. Because it shouldn't be just the independently wealthy. It shouldn't be folks who are coming from well-off families to, that shouldn't be a requirement to pursue your dreams.
Right. Exactly. So we've got another episode that shows, the benefits of unionization, and, not as celebratory of a manner, but it is still helpful, and it is still worth repeating. And that is Luis Leon from Labor Notes shared this on Twitter, that Tyson is laying off 1,600 poultry workers across Virginia and Arkansas. In Virginia, the workers are represented by UFCW Local 400. They will get a severance package, vacation payouts, and health insurance. By contrast, Tyson workers in Arkansas say that they won't get either.
Wow.
Yeah. And so, same company, exact same company, same type of work being done, and I can't imagine the standard of living where it is in Virginia and where it is in Arkansas is, all that different, and just totally different treatment of these workers as they're being laid off by the same company in two different contexts. One where they have a collective bargaining agreement that lays out conditions for laying people off, and one in where the workers don't have that. And we've seen, we're seeing the effects of that. Luis said that they went on strike a couple of days ago over this. They are working with the Workers Center Vince Ramos. We actually had one of the organizers from the Workers Center on the show to talk about Tyson workers. It may be 2 years ago now that we had them on the show, but I do remember that organization and the work that they were doing, organizing Tyson workers over in Arkansas. And so, all solidarity to them, and here's hoping that they can extract some concessions from this company, because the idea that you would, the idea that you would do this without, lay them off and leave them high and dry in a situation where, these people are sacrificing a lot for your company. Being a poultry worker is not an easy job. And the idea that they're not getting severance, they're not getting vacation payouts, they're not going to be able to continue their health insurance after they get laid off for some number of months. It's just really gross, especially when the company has the capacity to do that and has demonstrated the capacity to do that. It's just really disgusting behavior from this corporation. So all solidarity to them.
Yeah, absolutely. Unfortunately, not particularly surprising when it comes to Tyson. But, that's kind of been their behavior. And we've seen some of their disgusting behavior throughout this post-pandemic era, or, during the pandemic and in the years since then. We've seen their monopoly grow. We've seen their prices skyrocket. And we've seen some of the ways they treat their workers. Mm-hmm. So it's, and that's one of the reasons why unions are important, right? Not every employer has your best interest at heart. In fact, I would say most of them probably don't. And even the best of employers, you still could benefit from a union and the protection it provides, the collective organization it provides. And this is a key example. Even when things go totally south and the company is closing or the facility is closing, having a union there can make all the difference in the world in the way that plays out.
Absolutely.
And that's not to suggest that it always plays out well with a union, right? Sometimes our unions aren't strong enough to secure, the best severance package possible. And that's an issue that we have to deal with, and we have to be prepared in our unions for these kind of scenarios. Sometimes our facilities will close and people will lose jobs, and we have to be ready for those moments and prepared to make the best of it for our members.
Absolutely. So we're going to just continue on with the good news and the benefits of showing the benefits of unionization with another story recently. This one out of Kentucky. Teamsters Local 89 Cisco drivers voted by 98% to ratify a new contract from the company, bringing a 13-day strike to an end and establishing their first collective bargaining agreement. Wow. Yeah, very, very cool. Reading from the press release that Local 89 sent out at the end of the strike, they voted. The workers in voted to join Local 89 in 2022 amid a lot of typical concerns: wages, benefits, safety, a desire to end excruciatingly long and arduous work hours. And in early March, the drivers rejected a, quote, last, best, and final from the company because it didn't adequately address those concerns. And then they began a strike 13 days ago. They also extended their picket line to a Cisco facility in Los Angeles, California for 2 days last week, which is interesting. I didn't realize that. And the thing what they won is very, very impressive, it seems to me. So again, from their press release, delivery driver pay will immediately increase by $4.35 an hour.
That's great.
$4.35 an hour, immediate increase. Shuttle drivers will see an increase of $5.35 an hour to catch them up. Both groups will increase by another $3.50 by the end of the 5-year agreement, averaging a 34.5% increase over the life of the contract. So that immediate raise is the more impressive thing to me. $3.50 over 4 years seems like maybe they could have done a little bit better than that, but better than they had currently, certainly. And also, this is huge. Their previous healthcare plan had drivers paying 50% of their insurance premiums, and that has now been reduced to just 20%.
Yes, that is huge.
Absolutely huge. And in addition to that, there are several other things, like they have sick days now, where apparently they didn't have before. They have additional equipment. They have additional safety language. And one of the most important changes, according to Local 89, is the staffing. Drivers routinely worked 16-hour shifts, which took a heavy... Yeah, well, you would know about that, right? After an 18-hour shift yesterday. It was yesterday
last
that you worked?
weekend, yeah. That's why I wasn't on the show last Saturday, yeah.
And so that working 16 or 18-hour shifts take a heavy physical and mental toll.
It sure does, and I wouldn't want to be behind the wheel
Right.
of a large vehicle like that. It's concerning even for me just driving home late in the evening after a long shift. And so to think that these folks are out there behind the wheel for 16 hours, it's just it's not right.
Yeah, and they mentioned that often put them behind the wheel when they were dangerously exhausted. And so as part of the new contract, Cisco Louisville must now hire 9 additional delivery drivers and maintain a new minimum staffing number of 96. Anytime there are fewer than 96 delivery drivers, Cisco will be required to pay double time for all time worked in excess of 13 hours a day.
Heck yeah.
This double time penalty will ensure that Cisco Louisville will be hard at work trying to keep their staffing high, which in turn will provide drivers with much needed overtime relief and allow them to spend more time at home with their loved ones. This is really, really crucial stuff here.
I'd love to see them addressing staffing in the
and
negotiations.
immediately, and I always hear Adam, this is kind of confusing to me now, because I always hear that when you have a union and you raise wages, you actually cut jobs. But here, they're raising their wages immediately by between $4 and $5 an hour, and then they're getting they've created 9 more jobs.
Right.
Mark Wayne Mullen was trying to attack Sean O'Brien, saying, "Have you ever created a job?" Well, here's 9 jobs that the Teamsters just created.
Yeah.
Immediately.
Like, just as a matter of fact, that's what has happened. There are 9 more drivers. That's 9 more people who can be employed and now benefit from this contract. And, the reduced health insurance premiums and the increased pay per hour. That's huge.
Yeah.
And it's gonna relieve the working conditions of the folks on staff. And that's what I really like to see. I mean, because I think a lot of times, as workers, yes, pay is important and benefits are important, but our working conditions is what often, keeps us up at night, right? And that's often what, wears and tears on you is the working condition. And so to see them address that by adding additional staff, that is huge. And, I really applaud Local 89 for doing that because, of course, with any contract, there's give and take. Right. And it's possible maybe they could have gotten a little something else, in exchange for that. But they made it a priority to, enhance the working conditions of their members and make everybody safer and better off. And I think that was great.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that too often unions really do prioritize wages and health care to the detriment, which, obviously these are important things, right? Wages and health care, very important. But there is really not enough emphasis placed on time off from work.
Right.
On winning freedom from the boss.
And winning appropriate staffing levels. And that's something we see, a lot from nurses who have been fighting for appropriate staffing levels and nurse-to-patient ratios. And we see it with teachers' unions across the country. Not in Alabama, unfortunately, but we see it, in other places where class size limits and, case size limits for special education and other kind of specialty teachers. Those things are huge. And unions should not shy away from those areas because I agree with you. Sometimes we put too much emphasis on the bread and butter pay and benefits, and we don't really take a look at the holistic process of what it means to be that worker in that job every day.
Right. Yeah. Have we got Lee Harris in the Zoom?
I don't believe so.
Right.
Not yet.
We'll go ahead and hit this other story. And we're just racking up the good news. I didn't realize this when I was putting all this together, but here's another good, and this one is also out of Kentucky. Governor Andy Beshear vetoed an anti-union bill that came out of the legislature that was much like the Florida anti-union bill that we talked to McKenna Schuler about a couple of weeks ago that would prohibit automatic dues deduction for most public sector unions. And I believe that there was also a bit in there about some stuff about decertifying the union in that Kentucky bill, but I'm not sure. But yeah, Governor Andy Beshear vetoed it in stark contrast to what we're going to see out of Florida, where if that legislation gets out of the legislature, it will very quickly be signed by a Governor Ron DeSantis, and so love to see that out of Kentucky, where the governor is not trying to attack public servants.
Right, and their previous governor, the Republican that was up there, did do a DeSantis style, war on unions, and it clearly has backfired in Kentucky,
right?
Because there's obviously some pushback against that anti-union movement. I say movement loosely; it's it's not a genuine social movement. But and I just want to say right here that a lot of times on the show, we are very critical of both political parties. We are critical of the Democrats, and I think for good reason, because if you're looking at politics through the lens of what it means to be a working class person in this country or in this state, I think you can see that both parties fall short, and both parties have failed working class people to varying degrees, right?
Right.
That's not to say that there isn't a difference, and I think this is an illustration of where there is a difference. it is better that in Kentucky they have a Democrat as their governor than the alternative. And that's going to result in this stupid bill being vetoed.
Right.
And, you know, that's something to celebrate. So, you know, I don't want to ever give off the impression that, you know, I don't see that there is some difference.
Right.
We can all see that there are some differences. You know, maybe it's not enough differences. And the truth is, I don't know a ton about Governor Beshears, but I imagine I have some pretty different politics than he does, to put it mildly.
Yeah.
But that's important to have a movement that can push and bend, you know, state government closer to our interest. And so, shout out to Kentucky for being able to do that, to defeat that bill, and, you know, keep the wins a coming in Kentucky.
Yep.
And we do, I do believe we have Lee in the Zoom. Let me double check that. Yes, we do. So
Good deal.
Awesome.
Yeah. So Lee Harris is a staff writer at the American Prospect. In 2020, she co-founded New York Focus, which is an investigative news site on New York politics. Prior to that, she was editor of the independent newspaper at the University of Chicago. Lee, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us here on the Valley Labor Report.
Thanks for having me on. I'm a big fan.
Oh, well, very good. I'm a big fan of the work that you do over at the American Prospect. The American Prospect is definitely, you know, one of the better places for national news. I like what I see out of there.
Yeah, if you're interested in a magazine, this should be on your short list. Like you should check out that publication. They're putting out great work every week. Seriously.
Yeah. So you have a piece that. You know, that, and we've been tracking some of this, but you did a really good job of highlighting a local story that shows exactly what this is meaning in on the ground. And that story is about the lack of protections and the lack of enforcement in the CHIPS Act in particular, but also the Inflation Reduction Act. And I think that lack of protections actually made Bernie Sanders one of the lone votes against the CHIPS Act. Is that right?
I think that's right. Yep. And maybe to go a little, well, go ahead.
No, you go.
Maybe I'll give a little background on why I got into this story to begin with. So my story looks at the new TSMC chips facility that's being built in Phoenix. And to give, before we get into the labor politics of it, just some background on what's going on. This is the Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, TSMC, which is building a huge, what they call a fab, a chips factory in Phoenix. And context is the US obviously wants to onshore manufacturing of computer chips, these really crucial parts to basically all electronics. And TSMC is based in Taiwan, and it's super worried that China could prevent it from producing or exporting chips in a future military conflict or blockade. So this is seen as a key kind of national security project. Mm-hmm. And the campus that they're building is enormous. It's almost 2 miles by 1 mile, the entire campus. There are going to be several fabs there. And it's a $40 billion development that's expected to get a pretty big cash infusion from the CHIPS Act. And it's being built in Phoenix on top of already a really hot construction labor market between residential construction and then also some new building from the Inflation Reduction Act, including a lithium battery plant. So I kind of thought, okay, Arizona's an old right-to-work state. How are creative labor leaders taking advantage of those conditions to build up union density in a place where it's been really decimated? And in my view, they should be able to, since taxpayer money is being spent on these programs, right. And Biden's advertising them as, you know, creating good union jobs. That's his line at every speech that he gives at every ribbon cutting about these new projects. Mm-hmm. So I was really shocked when I talked to Aaron Butler, who's president of the Building Trades Council down in Arizona, and a couple other labor leaders who said, yeah, this should be a moment for huge investment in apprenticeship programs and workforce training. But unions are facing a lot of uncertainty about whether they'll even be asked to be on these projects because they've talked to TSMC. TSMC has, first of all, refused a project labor agreement, but also has been pretty cold and anti-union in their dealings with the building trades, which again has surprised them simply because it's been hard to get enough workers to staff projects of these size. So unions feel like they should be brought in as partners on these projects. So I'll pause there, but I think what I really want to get into is the conditions out at the plant itself, because not only, there's obviously a kind of like moral case for why they should be using union labor, but I was struck by the fact that it seems like the conditions are tough enough that the project's actually being delayed by the fact that they're using pretty inexperienced non-union subcontractors who have made pretty elementary mistakes.
Wow. Yeah. And just to emphasize that, you mentioned in your speech, in your article, that actually Biden's sales pitch at this fab emphasized the importance of, quote, hiring union folks. So he's actually like at this site, where we're talking about, they're not using union labor, talking about the importance of hiring union people to do this. And the importance of hiring union folks, you mentioned that there's a moral dimension to that, of like, we want people who, in particular, when we're investing as a public, we want to be kind of a model employer, right? We want to set the standard for the private industry in terms of wages, benefits, and working conditions, instead of our tax dollars funneling and driving a race to the bottom among construction workers. But also there is actually a real practical, small c conservative case for using union labor, and in that actually when you use union labor with their experienced journeymen, their long apprenticeship programs, you're going to get better quality work. You're going to finish on time. You're going to finish on or under budget. And you're saying that's not happening here.
That's right. So, and this is from speaking to workers on the job right now, some of whom didn't want to be identified, but also to labor leaders in the region who did. They are relying on pretty much anyone they can get at this point, because there is this, because it's just an enormous project, but that includes a bunch of non-union subcontractors. And for that reason, there have been a number of really ugly injuries, safety shortcuts described to me, and then mistakes that have just slowed down the project. So to give you a couple examples, I've heard from a couple folks about a really grisly injury in which there was a worker who was grinding with an 8-inch grinder on pipe, and he removed the guard. The grinder got away from him, and his thigh got cut down all the way down to the bone in a really horrible injury. In another case, a 20-inch piece of carbon steel was dropped off a crane and broke a guy's femur. And to give an example of the way in which mistakes can slow down projects, there's a non-union subcontractor on site that's now pretty notorious that I was told was pressure testing 72-inch pipe that they had installed. So like really big pipe that you can stand up in. They're testing it. They go to drain the pipe and they forget to vent it. So 110 feet of this enormous piping collapsed, collapsed in itself and destroyed the structural supports. And this required a lot of backpedaling, and it delayed the delivery of that project. And now if you ask union workers, they'll say that's first-year apprentice stuff. You learn very early on that if you're draining big piping, you have to vent it so that you don't create a low pressure area. But that's the kind of thing that is a real setback if you're using inexperienced, untrained workers. And that's how unions are making the case for themselves on this site.
Do you have an idea of how long it set the project back, or how much money that mistake cost?
No, I wish I knew. It's tough to get. I should actually ask for an estimate. But no, I think there are, beyond those kinds of specific errors, though, it seems like there are more general kind of coordination problems between a lot of the subcontractors working on this site. And I get, so to put this in wider, like, political context. I think it's kind of ironic that that the site is having these problems because we hear all the time about. I think the main criticism of the CHIPS Act has been, or a big one has been, from liberals. I mean, from a certain segment of Democrats, has been chips are a national security concern. We need to stand up these facilities as quickly as possible. And labor and environmentalists and people who want kind of special things attached, special regulations attached to these plants are just slowing them down.
I mean, including Ezra Klein. You mentioned Ezra Klein in your piece as one of these people that's like, oh, I don't know, maybe the American worker has it too good. Maybe it's kind of a...
Right, exactly. There's this whole meme out there that labor is way too powerful in the United States, and unions, with all of their political clout that they're throwing around, are going to slow down these projects. And what was surprising to me is that one of their main critiques has been that the Biden administration has written all of these requirements into the laws, requirements to use union workers or to provide childcare in order to get female workers on the job. Now, we can debate whether or not it would be a good idea to include those requirements. I personally think there's a good case for it. But the fact of the matter is the law didn't write in those requirements. The way it's structured is the Commerce Department says, we're offering what will ultimately be billions in dollars in subsidies for these types of projects. You come to us and tell us what your labor plans are. So they do request a plan. They say, tell us your workforce development plan, tell us if you're planning on using a project labor agreement, and tell us, by the way, if there's childcare facilities, affordable childcare facilities near the project site that you're planning on, because we think that makes it easier for female construction workers to participate on the site. But it doesn't require any of those things. It asks companies to tell them what they're doing and takes it into consideration. So they're like nice to haves. They're by no means requirements that are going to hold up projects for companies that decide not to do them.
That's just wild. That's and this and these complaints, I know Ezra Klein, and there's some, it's not to say that he hasn't done any good work, but his the thing that he puts out is like, I'm like a numbers guy, right? I'm like a facts and figures and numbers guy. And so the idea that he would put forward that, oh, there are all these onerous regulations when that's just flatly not true is really wild to me. And then it gets published in the New York Times.
And I think to zoom out a little bit from this one project in Phoenix, the bigger critique by Ezra Klein, who I think, by the way, is a really smart kind of critic, and broadly thinks of himself as being on the left and an interesting guy. But he and others, their critique has been basically, why is it so hard to build things in America? Why is it so costly to build a mile of public transit? Why does it take so long to get, housing built in big cities? And I think there's a grain of truth to that. Like it is really expensive to build all sorts of public infrastructure in the US. And he's raising really smart questions about why building can be slow and tough, and there are all these roadblocks. But I think it's misleading to lay all the blame at the feet of number one, unions, and then also environmentalists and other people who want review of projects. Partly because, just thinking about labor, Europe builds public transit and housing, for example, at a fraction of the cost that we build in the US, and has much stronger and better paid unions, and also much denser cities. So I think there are better ways to explain the cost overruns on American projects than just blaming unions.
Especially when unions aren't actually the ones doing most of the construction. Like unions are just simply, like in this project, unions by and large are just simply not present. There's some unions have been able to place some people, but by and large, this is the TSMC fabs are being constructed by non-union firms. And one of the things that you mentioned was that there are mistakes that are causing project delays. And we actually saw that just down the street here in Decatur, the United Launch Alliance, they build rockets for, sending payloads to the International Space Station here in Decatur, and they are doing an expansion, and the president, or the former president of the union for the machinists there, tried to get ULA to at least allow our local union construction trade unions to bid on the project. Just allow them to bid, just see what it would cost. And ULA wasn't interested. They hired some out-of-state non-union contractor, and they put up the frame of the thing, the steel frames, and then a big windstorm came the other day and it blew the whole thing down. And so now they're having to start over. And it's like, and so the iron workers, took a picture of it and did a little victory lap on Facebook saying, oh, this is what you get. But so it's just, it's really, but it is, it's a disappointing thing to see that kind of stuff. That's money wasted, time wasted,
Yep. I was going to mention that it's not all doom and gloom. I think there are positive signs on the horizon in some of these jobs that are being created. LIUNA, the laborers union, is building a new $6.5 million training center outside Phoenix. Just even though they haven't, they would have loved to have a project labor agreement or a couple giving them more certainty that once they train up these workers, the jobs are going to be available. But they have decided they think it's going to be a hot labor market for the next several years in that region, and they want union laborers to be competitive, which I think is really exciting. And we're going to see similar moves from other unions. And I think in general, the scale of investments we're seeing are just, even if companies fight them the entire way, ultimately, there's really high demand for a lot of labor in these regions. And so unions are going to end up taking some of those jobs and using that as a foothold.
And they have been able to win some votes at the Phoenix City Council, right?
Right, exactly. So they had this kind of surprise victory, which is gonna in which the city council, the progressive members of the city council, and then the one most right-wing member, kind of surprisingly sided with them on a vote to raise the pay for workers on city construction jobs to prevailing wages in the region. So this gives unions that pay prevailing wage a much fairer bite at these city construction jobs. And I think Phoenix did that, and several other cities in Arizona, Tucson and others, are now considering similar prevailing wage ordinances. So we could see a whole wave of those kinds of rulings, and it matters a lot. I mean, this just applies to city funded development, and it doesn't apply to residential construction, but it's federal, it's municipal building projects. But Phoenix has grown so quickly over the past couple of years, and there's so much backfill and sewage and other infrastructure, water treatment, streets. Like there's so much city construction work to be done because of that recent growth, that unions are really, really bullish on the next 5 or 6 years, and now they're going to be, receiving fair wages over that period.
Yeah, that'll be great. And so, with they obviously have some amount of support and relationships with local politicians. Is there any reason to believe that maybe over the next year or so they'll be able to make some headway with TSMC on this construction site, or are they mostly just setting their sights on city construction and maybe trying to get a foothold in residential construction and writing off TSMC as a lost cause?
No, I think they're really going to be fighting for more jobs at TSMC, given the scale of the project and the fact that it's likely to receive huge taxpayer funding. And I think the Biden administration and federal politicians have way more sway here than you might think, given that this is their baby. Like they passed legislation aimed at standing up a couple of fabs at Intel and Intel, Micron, TSMC. There's a handful of companies. The Biden administration has spent many hours in the room with the executives at these companies. If there's enough pressure from labor, and if the administration makes it a priority, it seems to me they can easily negotiate those conditions. So it's a matter of sort of unions keeping up pressure, and the Biden administration hearing that pressure and delivering the union jobs that they keep promising.
From your lips to God's ears, Lee Harris, staff writer at the American Prospect. Is there anything else that you think folks ought to know about this story before we let you go?
I think we covered it. The one other thing I'd say is that I'm super interested in this question of whether the administration is actually delivering the union jobs that they're promising. So I'm always looking to talk to workers, especially in the South, about the kinds of conditions they're seeing. So hit me up at lharris@prospect.org, or my phone number, which is on my site at the Prospect website. And I'd love to hear what people are kind of seeing on the ground.
And you can follow her on Twitter at Lee_Harris with 3 E's, LEEE_Harris on Twitter.com.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thanks.
Appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
All right, folks. Like I said, that was Lee Harris, staff writer at the American Prospect. Check out her work. Really great. And the publication is great as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Very glad to follow them every week. I get their emails in my inbox, and there's always, great reporting coming out.
Yep, for sure. So we had here's another quick hit from out of North Dakota. North Dakota lawmakers, there was for about a week, free school lunch was in the was in the news really heavily. A debate about whether or not we ought to just give children lunch at school.
And we even talked a little bit about a new bill proposed in Congress that would not necessarily do that, but come closer to that.
Right. And it seems to us to be a very reasonable thing, to just give children food when they are under the care of the government. Seems like a good thing to do. It would not cost very much money at all. But some Republicans do not have that opinion. And they think that it is important to have children understand that there's no such thing as a free lunch, and that they need to earn their own way. And we don't need to instill perpetual childhood in these children. So they voted down a free school lunch bill in North Dakota a few weeks ago. And last week, just 10 days after shooting down that bill to provide free lunch to low-income students, the North Dakota Senate approved legislation to give lawmakers more money for meal reimbursements.
Wow. How slimy
they're
can
giving
you get?
They're giving themselves free lunches, but not children. The legislation increases, according to KFYR TV, the legislation increases reimbursements for state employees, including lawmakers, during interim legislative meetings from $35 a day to $45 a day. So,
and just for the record, it doesn't cost $45 a day to feed children in schools.
I don't even think it would cost $10 a day, which is the increase. It's an increase in $10 from 35 to 45. I don't think it would cost $10 to feed a child both breakfast and lunch, right? Isn't it something? What is a?
It's a couple bucks.
Yeah,
a couple bucks.
Well, it's a couple bucks actually if you buy the meal as a student. How much does it actually cost to produce? Like $1?
Yeah, somewhere in that range. So
and so
this
they
is
get
pretty absurd.
$10 more per day. You think about that. You could feed 10 children for the increase of the lunch reimbursement for every one of these lawmakers.
Right.
Wild.
Yeah, I mean, that is just, to me, so insulting.
Yeah.
That's insulting to everyone, regardless of their politics or, partisan affiliation, the idea that children don't deserve a meal, but you do as a legislator, as a politician. You need to up your meal allowance, $45 a day. And also, like, how many of us would love to have $45 to go spend on lunch?
Right.
Because that's not the average worker.
Mm-hmm.
A $45 meal is a luxury for most of us.
Right.
So yeah, it's a real slap in the face, and I hope the folks of North Dakota really hold their feet to the fire about this and don't forget about this.
Yeah.
Don't forget their priorities. And again, just for the record, it is a good thing to feed children. Right. It is a good thing to have free school meals. Breakfast, lunch, there are supper programs, and those are very essential because the reality is in this country and in this state that many of our children rely on school to have nutrition. Without school meals, they may not have a hot meal that day.
Yep.
And so that's important on a moral level, just a basic moral foundation that children should be fed and taken care of. It's important on an academic level because hungry kids don't learn, not at the same level as kids who are well fed.
Right.
It's important from an economic, standpoint. It actually just makes more sense economically to provide free meals to all involved. And there are opportunities there to partner with local farmers and, have community partnerships there. It's just a shame that they would move in that direction, while, there is at least conversation nationally about school meals for all. And like I said, we mentioned last week, I guess it was, or week before, the Healthy School Meals for All bill that's been put out in Congress. It wouldn't exactly provide free meals to every single student, but it would get us a lot closer to that.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the direction we need to move in, not the direction of North Dakota, where we reject meals for children and increase reimbursement rates for politicians.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's see. Adam, do you want to talk about the
we'll talk about what's going on with Apple?
What's going on let's talk about what's going on with Apple.
Yeah, so I did have a little bit of an update from the CWA that they put out recently. Apple has escalated its anti-union campaign, firing 5 workers at its Country Club Plaza store in Kansas City, Missouri. So this is a Southern story. On Tuesday, March 28th, CWA filed unfair labor practice charges with the National Labor Relations Board to contest those illegal terminations and the ongoing intimidation of workers at Apple's Memorial City store in Houston. Last May, the CWA was forced to abandon an election in Atlanta in the face of daunting union busting by Apple. In June, the very first Apple store went union with workers in a Baltimore store organizing with the machinist. So before I get to the full press release here from the CWA about this, I do want to mention that Apple has its Alabama connection through Tim Cook, who is, I believe, the CEO of Apple. I'm not sure what other titles he may hold, but he's an Alabama native.
Really?
Yes.
I did not know that.
I'm feeling... Now you're making me question myself, and you should probably Google that to confirm. Yes, he is from Mobile, Alabama. Okay. I knew I didn't make that up. All right. How's that for some live fact-checking, y'all?
There you go.
So, yeah, Tim Cook is running Apple. He's from Alabama, and so occasionally we'll get these articles from the Alabama media about, high-profile Alabamians. And... I don't know. I as an Alabamian, I'm curious why this high-profile Alabamian is intent on union busting. Why? Why are you busting the union organizing drives in your stores when you're an extremely profitable corporation? You've got it made. You're one of the most successful corporations in the history of the world. And you can't let some folks organize in your retail stores. You got to go intimidate folks in Houston, Texas. You're going to go fire some folks in Kansas City, Missouri. It's just ridiculous. Back to the CWA. As I said, they filed 2 unfair labor practice charges with the NLRB on behalf of the Apple retail workers in Kansas City and Houston who have been fired and have faced intimidation on the job for exercising their right to organize. This is the first ULP filed by CWA against Apple for the unlawful termination of workers for union organizing. The charges allege that Apple illegally fired 5 workers at the Country Club Plaza store in Kansas City, and that some of the fired workers were forced to sign a release of all claims in exchange for a meager severance package. Now, last month, the NLRB ruled that employers cannot require broad severance agreements that prevent former employees from speaking out against the union busting and other issues they experienced on the job. Evidently, Apple did not get that memo. At the Memorial City store in Houston, Apple workers were individually interrogated regarding their support of the union, promised improved working conditions if they declined to support the union, and threatened with worsening workplace conditions if they continued to organize. Workers were also disciplined in retaliation for their continued support of the union. Apple management said I was fired for a typo in my timesheet that I had documented and tried to correct. Yet it is clear the real reason I was fired was for exercising my right to organize and win a protected voice on the job. Apple then attempted to silence me by having me sign a release in order to receive my severance package. No one working at Apple should be interrogated, intimidated, or silenced for trying to organize and win our fair share, said Delight Zhang, former Kansas City, Missouri Apple retail worker. Since Apple retail workers began organizing a little over a year ago, the company has chosen the low road, retaining the notorious union-busting firm Littler Mendelson and launching a coordinated national union-busting campaign. Workers at multiple stores have experienced the same types of interrogation, intimidation, and attempted silencing. In response, CWA has filed numerous ULPs against the trillion-dollar company for violating its workers' rights to organize for better pay and working conditions. CWA has now filed ULPs alleging retaliation against worker organizing by Apple at retail stores in Atlanta, New York, Oklahoma City, Houston, and Kansas City. I'm going to pause there to point out, I notice a southern theme there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 cities, and 4 out of the 5 are arguably in the South. Is that an indication of Apple's behavior and attitude towards the South? Does Apple think that because we're the South and these are right-to-work states that it's the Wild West and you get to behave however you please? Claude Cummings, Jr., Vice President of CWA District 6, had this to say. From Starbucks to Apple, the union-busting playbook used by unimaginably wealthy corporations is always the same. Isolate, intimidate, fire, and silence. It is clear that Apple's senior management team does not respect their workers' legally protected right to organize and negotiate for better pay and working conditions. Apple has chosen to continue to break the law, so we will continue to hold the company accountable because no corporation is above the law. Apple's attempt to interfere with worker organizing is only strengthening the resolve of workers to win a seat at the negotiating table. Again, that was Claude Cummings, Jr., Vice President of CWA District 6. CWA recently won reinstatement and compensation for back pay and damages for Seattle area Verizon Wireless worker Jesse Mason, who was illegally fired by the company for union organizing activities. So, really hope to see more successes like the one for Jesse Mason. Hopefully they can get these workers who were terminated back with back pay and damages. But just, really shameful union busting by Apple. It's sad to see it. There's no need in it. The money that they're spending doing their union busting could be spent settling the contract, right? They could just sit down with these folks, recognize what they're trying to do. And that's, I just have to say that is an option. Right? The company could choose to just recognize the workers' organizing efforts. Whenever you see these contentious battles, whenever you see these union campaigns that are being attacked by the company, know that they have that option on the table. They do not have to take the low road. They choose to take the low road. And in some cases, they would rather spend more money doing that than if they had simply worked with the union. And that's where you see a priority over power, of power over profits at some point. They would rather crush the workers organizing, even if it costs them more money to do so. And, obviously a corporation such as Apple has resources that are virtually unlimited. So it's a testament to the workers that they are fighting back against such a behemoth of a corporation. So shout out to the CWA, sending all our support and solidarity with y'all as y'all fight these battles in Kansas City and Houston and Atlanta and across the South, across the country.
Yeah, absolutely. So do you want to hit this bit about culture wars and vouchers in Alabama, or you want to save that for next week maybe?
I think I want to save that for next week. And part of that is because I want to see what else comes out about this divisive concepts bill in Alabama. So I guess, maybe just as a preview, we do plan to talk about the way in which culture wars have impacted our schools. There was actually a new study came out this year from UCLA, I believe it was. Professor John Rogers came out with a study called Educating for a Diverse Democracy, the Chilling Role of Political Conflict in Blue, Purple, and Red Communities. And so what John Rogers did is take a look at how these cultural war topics and this divisive politics is actually trickling into the classroom. And one of the other things they've looked at is these so-called anti-CRT bills, right? There's been hundreds of them in the last couple of years across the country. And we've seen it popping up every year here in Alabama over the last couple of years. It is back. It's called Divisive Concepts. And so that's something we want to take a look at and examine a little bit closer. And of course, the way that connects to the push for vouchers. And we talked with our main show guest, Griscom, this morning about vouchers in Texas. And the bill that is being proposed in Alabama works very similarly. It, in fact, may be looser in terms of what you can spend the money on. But it's no coincidence that classroom teaching is under attack as they push for privatization. It's no coincidence that the integrity of teachers is under attack as they push for privatization. And one of the concerning things there is the way in which fear is used to restrict intellectual freedom and to restrict the democratic impulses of public education. So that's I guess a preview of this sort of conversation we plan to have there about culture wars, the vouchers and privatization schemes, and how those are intersecting in Alabama.
Yep. All right. Well, I'll be looking forward to that. And with that, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. Appreciate everybody tuning in. Just one more reminder, we do have the North Alabama Area Labor Council's barbecue at Braun Spring Park on April 22nd.
That's right, next Saturday. So all of you locals, we want to see you.
Yeah, we want to see you. And
all you Birmingham folks,
come see us tomorrow.
Come see us tomorrow.
April 16th at the CWA Union Hall in Birmingham from 1 to 4 p.m. You can buy a ticket for that. The barbecue next weekend is free. with the Labor Council. But if you want a ticket to the fundraiser, you can get that at tvlr.fm/fundraiser. 100% of the proceeds go to us. If you do not have the funds, we do have a donor that has purchased 10 tickets that we can give away for free. So if you would like to be there just to hang out with some cool folks tomorrow, but you don't have the funds or you don't feel like you can justify the expense, then send us an email and claim one of those free tickets.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. Appreciate the opportunity. Really appreciate Haley and Josh with the Youth Caucus of the Democratic Party in Alabama for doing this. They were interested in helping us, and I really appreciate that a lot. We're happy to do live in-person events like that. So if there's ever any ideas you have, feel free to pitch them. If there's ever any events or conferences going on that you think we might need to show up to, let us know. We will be attending a few different events over the course of the spring and the summer. We're going to be at the Building Trades Council's conference this summer. We're going to be at an Ironworkers conference. I'll be speaking to some high school students about unions and the history of unions and their job opportunities available to them. So, we're trying to expand, and we're trying to kind of just expand our outreach and talk to folks in different areas and in different ways, because that's what it takes, right? Just having these conversations and building relationships with folks so that we can strengthen the labor movement. And we believe doing that requires our own media. So that's why we do what we do at the Valley Labor Report. So really appreciate everyone who tuned in today. Hope everyone has a great weekend.
All power to the workers.